You're now listening to the Something Good Podcast Network. Please press any key to continue.
A kiss, as defined by Dan Webster, is something pleasing, a caress, a gentle touch. But there's another kiss that isn't in Webster's.
Hey world, we're kids!
Some critics say they don't make music, they just make noise.
Yeah, Kiss sucks!
Kiss implies the extreme in the theatrics on stage, utilizing fire and smoke and bizarre costumes, and the ever-consistent, constant concealment of their true identities.
Speaking of which, Kiss is going to have its own comic book soon.
Take Kiss with you. It's fun. Show your friends and be the first. Now.
Oh my God, no time to turn!
And welcome once again to No Time to Turn, a Kiss nerd podcast.
Nerds.
Yeah. As always, I'm joined by Cap and Alex from the Something Good For You Network.
Yo, yo.
That was my bad Gene Simmons, there, so bear with me.
I would never have caught that.
I wouldn't have either.
In 1,012 years. But if you say so, good on you, man.
You do you, brother.
I hate that saying. You know, I really hate that saying.
You
do. You know what? Yeah, of course I'm going to fucking do me. I am me. Get the fuck out of here. I am me. You do you.
What am I gonna do? Who else am I going to do?
Who else am I going to do?
Come on, Russ. You're a powerful and attractive man.
I'm Gene Simmons.
Kiss.
All right, so we're tracking the history of Kiss, album by album, year by year, and of course, it's really not year by year anymore, as we've talked about in the previous episodes. They're running in a fall. Every fall they release a new album, and they're kind of running in this cycle, and they're coming out of the Animalize cycle, and now we're going into the Asylum era, which is quite the colorful era.
Mm-hmm. You ain't lying.
Yes. And originally, the original conceived title for Dynasty. And did you not know about that?
I didn't either.
Did we touch on that? On the other?
I'm not sure.
Is that why they did a photo shoot with the
straight
jackets?
Yeah, they were. The original concept title was going to be called Asylum.
It's just interesting because the layout of the photo on Asylum is similar to Dynasty too.
Yeah, we'll get to that because that stuck in my craw when it came out.
Mm-hmm. Especially the certain color tones they use.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
What's interesting here is as an aside.
An aside to Asylum?
I never knew this. I came across some information that claims that Gene Simmons and Howard Marks formed something called Monster Management. And they had a sit-down, a meeting, trying to recruit Van Halen. And I guess this would have been as Van Halen were leaving, we're splitting up with David Lee Roth and Noel Monk, their manager, and moving on to
Sammy
what would
Hagar.
prove to be greener pastures.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't realize that the Sammy Hagar era sold like 3-1 to the Dave era. A lot of people don't even realize that. The Sammy Hagar era was so much more successful than the David Lee Roth era. But what does everyone remember?
Exactly.
What does everyone want to hear now? It's kind of the same. And it's not the same with Kiss, actually. It's not the same at all. But everything that everyone wants to hear from Kiss was their 70s thing, too. Yeah. And the only reason why Kiss exists right now is because as we've documented in the previous episodes, they went after their recording label. They won, but they didn't win, and their record label bit back on them really hard. Now they're just on the hook, and things are going to get, financially speaking, worse and worse. But I just think it's interesting. It's like, Gene's still out there mogling.
Yeah.
He's trying to do everything he can.
Well, it's like, I think, and I hate to use this expression, he's looking for a back door out.
Yeah.
As opposed to a backdoor in. He's looking for,
Well, it's because we kind of talked about during, during Animalize, rather, that Gene was starting to become kind of distant and putting his fingers in other pots, no pun intended. But it's like, now, this is like fully disconnected Gene. This is the Gene that's just like not even showing up to the studio.
Yeah.
Is this backdoors or is this a safety net? Because of
either way,
self-preservation.
Self-preservation, and it makes sense. Although the Animalize, as we talked about in the Animalize episode, that's really the album that saved them.
Yeah, Because it was even a semi-successful tour. Like they weren't selling out crazy, but it was pretty successful.
There's a handful of sellouts. I mean, they had a sizable uptick in attendance figures, and the album did pretty well, went platinum. So now they're in rebuild mode, and they are. The only, I guess, if there is a setback, they're on their third guitarist in as many albums.
Yeah,
right.
So there is that kind of like, who cares now? And why would anyone care
about maybe specifically who the guitarist is? Yeah,
I mean, this has become essentially, like I said in previous episode, Kiss is a duo. Whether anyone wants to acknowledge that or not, even their diehard fans to this day, no, they're not. Yes, they are. Kiss are legitimately and literally a duo, because that's the only two members that the record company recognizes. Kiss is recognized as Gene and Paul, not Gene, Paul, Eric, and whoever else.
Right.
Those guys are employees.
They were hired guns.
They could be anybody, and I'm not like denigrating what their talents are as musicians or their personas as individuals or as personality, as individual. I'm just stating this as a matter of fact. Kiss is a duo. I mean, and Bruce, let's be fair here. Great guitar player.
Yeah.
But he never really establishes himself as one of the leading guitar gods of the 1980s.
No, but I would argue that he was the most well-rounded guitar player that Kiss ever had. And I know that's saying a lot. Ace Frehley has, it's his own vibe. Vinnie Vincent was his own vibe, and Mark St. John did what he did on, one record. I would argue that Bruce, is acoustically, electrically, was probably the most well-rounded player that the band ever had.
Well, yeah, I mean, I feel like there's a big difference between talent and style. Ace had a lot of style where Bruce kind of lacked style.
Yeah.
Bruce was technically more talented than Ace, and I know that feels so bad to say, but again, there's a difference between style and talent.
Well,
Ace had a style about him that no one could replicate.
I understand what you're saying, but I would say it differently. I think there's a difference between skill and talent.
Okay.
Whereas Bruce Kulick was a skilled guitar player, Ace was a talented guitar player.
Okay.
Bruce came
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Bruce came in and did a job.
Yeah.
But no, I can say that on tons of guitar players. Guitar players I personally know, they're guys that have learned the skill, almost like playing a video game or something. It's like they have the skill. It takes an innate talent in and of itself.
Yeah.
But then there's guys that seem like they just pick up a guitar and they figure it out effortlessly. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And Ace never really probably applied himself to develop any real skill, quote unquote. But his talent was raw enough that it carried him through. And then now, you can say that's a subjective kind of argument as to what is better or what you like more. Obviously, I'm more partial to a talented style. We talked about this in the previous episode. A lot of great guitar players in rock and roll. Not a lot of great rock and roll guitar players. Mm-hmm. And I will throw Eddie Van Halen under that bus. I came across a YouTube video the other night, and it was like Eddie Van Halen warming up the crowd, and it's like him under the stage before they go out to the stage, and he's not even looking at the guitar, and he's doing all that shit like it's like, and it's effortless, and it's impressive, but you know what else? It's like, it's like it becomes, I remember a guy telling me when I was young that the guitar to him was passe. And I didn't understand what he meant by that. But years later, I started looking at these guys, the Joe Satriani's, the Eddie Van Halen's, the Steve Vai's, and I got to where like the technique and the skill level had overcome the talent point where you don't even care anymore. It's like it feeds to a very niche audience that really enjoy that sort of stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
But, and I think we talked about this in the previous episode, you can't sing along with these solos. No. You could sing along with an A solo. I could name a song, any Kiss song from the 70s, right? Mm-hmm. Name one, just a random one. And I can sing the solo.
Mr. Speed. Do it.
Wait, you know what I'm thinking? I'm getting.
I already have it.
Love them, leave her. Ah.
Starts with the.
Yeah, yeah. You know what I'm talking about.
There you go, Barry.
Yeah, I was going to say that's part of the reason why I didn't want to go there.
I'll be the dancing monkey.
So you understand what I mean?
Oh,
by
totally.
That.
Yeah.
Not to go.
Now sing the solo from "I've Had Enough Into the Fire." You see what I mean? Yeah. I mean, and it's like, okay, whatever, you know.
No, and I totally get that. Not to get too far off into a side tangent or anything like that, but I had a DVD that had Joe Satriani, Steve Vai, and Yngwie Malmsteen on it. And the Joe Satriani one starts off cool because it's more bluesy. Then you get to Steve Vai's set that's all over the place with triple neck guitars. And then by the time you get to Yngwie Malmsteen's set, you're just done with the electric guitar.
Now, something that I just now ran across, and I wish I had thought, it's like I thought about it earlier this week to do a little research on it, and I didn't. Fingers crossed you may have done a little info on this. Right before they even go into Asylum, something they kind of did in between Animalize and Asylum is they reissued Crazy Nights with Bruce on the cover and remixed 2 or 3 of the songs.
Now, see, I just recently became aware they even remix songs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I didn't know that. I've never listened to that version of that album. I've never had a copy of it, never cared. I was like, I've got it. What do I need that for? So I didn't like the idea that they put Bruce on the cover.
On it, yeah.
I just thought, you know,
I mean, who would they have put on the cover though?
Well, I mean, they put Ace on the cover.
So why not put Bruce?
Why, you know, I don't. And it's like they reissued that trying to get, I guess, something out of it. And I wonder if that was a record company decision, or I doubt it was a Kiss decision.
And I wish I had thought to look at. I was pulling up. I usually use a Kiss FAQ for the album information of like who plays on what tracks.
Well, I'm sure
and like
that
right
was...
next to it, they had the label for the reissue of Creatures. I was like, shit. And I'm reading and it's like there's not a lot of info on why they did it. So I wish I had thought to look it up.
I mean,
more.
if just judging on what we've talked about, they aren't recouping the money on their advances. They have to make some money back, and obviously the record company is like, let's get some money out of this shit.
Yeah.
You know, it didn't sell, but maybe now that the group is enjoying a little bit of a resurgence with Analyze, maybe this will trickle down to some other.
And it is a heavier record, and they're trying to conceitedly write more heavier sounding things.
Yeah, I don't, who knows, but this puts them, I guess, stupidly, I didn't write down dates. I had it, and I when I make my notes, sometimes they come in.
Yeah, they only
kind of out of order, and then I have to realign them. They're in the studio. They're at Electric Lady, which is a step up from Right Track, where they had been.
I know. I thought that was kind of interesting as they went back to Electric Lady.
Well, I mean, it wasn't a step down; it was a step up. I'm thinking, going to going to a place like Right Track was probably a budget constraint. Mm-hmm. And I don't know anything about that studio. I don't know, good, bad, indifferent. It may be a great studio, but it's not a prestige name studio like Record Plant or Electric Lady.
But yeah, from June to July of 85.
Okay,
they were recording.
So summer of 85, they're in the studio. This will get a Gene Simmons, Paul Stanley co-production credit, but it's, I think, largely just Paul working alone.
Now, I do find something really interesting before we really even go to a track-by-track section is in both Gene and Paul's book, they say that this is the time in which Gene was the most absent, working with different bands, trying to be a movie star, this, that, and the other. But from all I can tell, there's only 2 tracks Gene didn't play bass on.
Yeah.
But yet the album previously... And even some of the earlier stuff, he was
more than
exactly. And remember the infamous photo of them in the Asylum booth recording, and they had like a Gene stand up that they were posing with. Have you not seen that photo?
No.
I'll make sure and I'll make a little note for myself to make sure and post it for the listeners also, and I'll show you after the show. It's like a photo of all. Actually, no, it was Animalize. Sorry, it was them in the studio for Animalize because Mark St. John was there, and they're all huddled around like trying to take a photo, and you can clearly see they left a space for Gene, and then they picked like this random photo and like photoshopped him in.
Oh, weird.
It's a very bizarre looking photo. But yeah, so it seems as if this is the first record in a minute that has the people that are on the cover
actually playing on it. Yeah. You know what? I hadn't even considered that. You're absolutely right, though. That is, and I think now that you say that, I think that's why this record has sort of a more of a cohesive feel than the others.
I'd agree with that.
You want to just go ahead and start hitting this track by track here?
Yeah,
because it didn't. That's something else. Also, we really don't have a lot of information on the recording process of this, and I've noticed that throughout the years of me kind of diving into Kiss is around Animalize and Asylum. There's not a whole lot of like internal studio documents like we can sometimes get with others.
Yeah, I think this is because this probably ran pretty smooth. I think by this point, they had finally kind of solidified their lineup. They were all kind of...
They got their songwriting teams.
Or whatever. It's interesting that they're still not writing together, which they rarely ever did anyway. But we'll just go ahead and start jumping through this track by track. Opening track, King of the Mountain. I think this is a weak opener.
I don't know, man. This is one that gets stuck in my head every time I put it on, too. Yeah.
Interesting.
It's like for better or worse, too. There's a lot of Kiss tracks on the next couple of albums that that'll get stuck in your head and become earworms. But this takes me back from when I was a kid and listening to classic rock radio and when House of Hair was a thing. I don't know if it's still a thing or not, but
House of Hair
with Dee Snider, and he would play a lot of this era of Kiss. It's like, we got a new Kiss track on, but it would be stuff like King of the Mountain specifically. Yeah.
So I kind of echo his slightly. My note is a unnecessary drum intro. Like that was just there was like two parts to it.
It sounds like he's falling over the drums. Like get behind the drums, Eric. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
So it's like if they had like kept the very last roll in, I think it would have been a little better. But it was just unnecessary drum intro. But I said not a bad opener. The lyrics are what make the song forgettable.
I knew you were going to go into that. It's the King of the Mountain.
It's him conquering the world again.
I'm Paul Stanley, and I'm going to do
that montage music.
It's the montage music, yes.
And it's that Desmond Child fucking, big chorus, harmony, all those layers of vocals on top of it. That
I will say yes, and I agree, and I like that. And I'll say personally, if we didn't have so many Paul songs about him conquering the world and being the King of the Mountain, I would probably like this one more. But it just feels so repetitive with all his other songs he was writing like that at the time.
I can see that. This just feels like filler material to me. It doesn't grab me. It doesn't make me want to hear what's coming next.
Cool little pre-solo break though.
I just didn't care for it. I could remember. You gotta remember, I had this when it came out. The first time I ever heard it was the same day I saw Kiss for the first time.
Right.
And later on, I had this on cassette because cassette was the primary medium.
We got
of
the
listening to
BMX
music.
races outside today.
I don't know if that's coming up. I don't know if that's coming. You know what? They're rounding up to be the King of the Mountain. But I mean, I didn't like the song even when I was a kid and I was into it. But I just, and I'm not saying this is true of the whole album, but this one song I just don't think is a good opening song. I don't think it's even really that good of a song. I mean, it's a forgettable. To me, it's forgettable and unnecessary, which is not a good way to be. Whereas in the past, and I know, again, we can't judge this against their past. We've talked about this, but it just seems like any song could have been a potential song that you'd see them play live once upon a time, and now it's like they're consciously going for high spots.
Yeah,
I said this.
And this isn't a high spot that they're going for here.
No, and if folks ever look in the episode description, you see a little link tree thing, and we have what's called a Discord. And I'm saying it like this because we never really mentioned Discord on this show before, but essentially it's like a organized Facebook Messenger chat mixed with like the old AOL chat room days, and it's just an app you can download. So, folks, if you're listening and want to join in Kiss conversations, we have those in there from time to time. But in there, we also have a segment called What Are You Listening To? And we just put random songs that we like that we're currently listening to. And listening to this record kind of did put me in a bit of an 80s hair metal phase. And like, because Mom listened to that when I was growing up.
Right.
And I quickly decided that Asylum would have been better as a Cinderella record.
Yeah.
I started listening to some Cinderella stuff, and there's a lot of DNA, and it was kind of the same time period. I looked at record release dates, and songs like Shake Me, that could have fit on Asylum.
Or any of the
But
Wasp.
Shake Me, I think, is better than anything that was on Asylum.
Or like Wasp material. Like it's that thing I brought up last episode where like the guitar tone of that era in hard rock was just, indistinguishable from, it's just the same, just kind of mid-rangey kind of, Kramer guitar tone that's just used on everything.
It's generic,
very
as fuck.
saturated.
Generic.
And the reason I pulled Cinderella is everyone always calls it like the hair metal AC/DC. Ignore the vocal tone, because that's where people pull the AC/DC
Right.
thing from. Listen to the guitar riffs and the way they're trying to project the music. It absolutely sounds like what Paul was trying to accomplish on Asylum, at least in my book.
Did he not get Paul considered to produce Cinderella at some point?
I feel like I heard about that, but that wasn't anything I ran
I know
across.
he did Guns N' Roses.
Yeah,
but
I've always heard the Guns N' Roses one.
Anyway,
Yeah.
next
song.
track.
Any way you slice it.
Everybody. Paul,
Any way you slice it.
one thing I've noticed about the Gene tracks on these on this and Crazy Nights is that all the Gene tracks are trying to be like the heavy metal chuggy kind of like driving songs.
That clip note thing. I know. I wrote that on here. I'm like, I wish they hadn't done that. I think that it anchors it too deeply into something when it could have been something else.
Yeah.
Because I can hear that riff working differently to a greater strength. Perhaps even to the, I don't know. I want to say that's the one where I'm like, if they did the drum beat different, it could have pulled out a whole different. That song could have been pulled into a whole different realm and been a much better song. I think this is a decent riff. I think it's a decent song.
Well, that's what
too.
I had. I said one of Gene's better contributions over the last few years.
If he wrote the song, because you see Howard Rice's name mentioned, and then we talked about how Gene may or may not have written all these songs too.
And then I do have the chorus is insufferably goofy.
Any way you slice it.
Anyway you slice it. Anyway you slice
Or that. What about that blues ending? Dun, dun, dun. You're not your mother's daughter anymore.
So it's like those little moments on there. I'm just like,
Well, you know what's funny is that's a difference between, like, I guess people like us sitting here at this table that have come up through other channels or have an awareness of other styles of music and where their core audience probably don't, and they hear something like that as being badass, where we hear that as being the complete fucking cheeseball nonsense that it is. And you know now that you know something that they don't, and they don't understand why you can't see it the way they see it. And it's like, because it's so goddamn cliche and cheesy and stupid.
And the thing is I don't hate on cheese. There's a lot of cheesy things
There
I
are.
like.
There's good cheese and there's bad cheese. This is like bad, smelly Limburger cheese. You know what?
If you're going to give me smelly cheese, at least make it blue cheese.
I've told this story recently on my Facebook page, but I used to know these kids when I was little that were from up north, and they had no fucks to give to anybody or anyone. And there was this kid that they used to pick on all the time. He had a real thick Southern accent, and his mom came down one time because they had sent him home crying or whatever. And she came down and she was like, redneck deluxe, the beehive haircut with the little swirly Q kind of sideburn looking thing.
Oh yeah,
she was probably 32, and she looks like she was like going on 65. With the cig dangling, the Salem, and she comes down going, "Why are you always picking on my boy?" And they got right up into their face and went, "'Cause he's so goddamn stupid," making fun of her accent, the whole thing. And I was like 8 years old. I was aghast. I'm like, you can't talk to a person's mom like that. Well, yeah, they could. They did it, and they got away with it.
Yeah.
And that's how I feel about this when I talk about this music. It's like people go, "Why are you always picking on my music?" Because it's so goddamn stupid. And that's just, and like this could have been a pretty good song.
And this is just our opinions.
Yeah, well, no, it's not an opinion. This is not a good song. But here's where I'm going to throw everybody sideways. Who Wants to Be Lonely?
I think it's a fine song.
This is a pretty good song.
This is one of the better songs on the record. I was literally, we were talking about it earlier this week in the apartment because I was asking, I was like, is Asylum an easier listen for you than Animalize was? And he was like, not really. I said, well, exactly what you said earlier, which is why I wasn't going to parrot you. I said, well, to me, this actually feels a lot more concise. And I started and I kind of like half-assed started like prancing in the living room, kind of doing, "Who wants to be lonely?" He's like, oh God, not that one. I was like, really?
It's really borderline cheesy here, but it still works for what it's trying to do. I'm surprised this wasn't more successful. I was surprised that it hit me the way it did.
Yeah.
Because I had an aha moment that I didn't have with this song previously. And we've talked about this in the earlier episodes. What made so much of early Kiss so great was they had this hidden weapon, this secret weapon that they could pull out that you never even consciously acknowledge until you think about it. And that's that R&B influence.
Yeah.
And that's all over this.
And you know what? And it was a slightly different vocal approach on Paul's for this song than he had done a lot more. It was a little bit more baritone. He wasn't trying to be as squealy, which was a nice change because that's something else that we had kind of mentioned over the last few records is Paul changed his vocal style. Well, this was a little bit more like late 70s.
Yeah, this goes, but it's deeper. But you know, what are you going to say?
I was just going to say, I'm surprised this isn't a Desmond Child co-write. This is a John Bavar.
John Bavar did a lot of stuff like this too.
John
I feel
Bavar
it.
had been in the Plasmatics, which is interesting. But I tell you, the only reason why I think this doesn't work isn't because of what Paul does with it. It's because Eric Carr can't play R&B, and which is really weird to me because he played in R&B bands in the 70s, or he's choosing not to, I should probably say.
Right. Eric Carr is this Alan Schwartzberg. Because he's still on this record too. The MVP of the 80s.
God damn, man, they were just like shitting all over. Did they even want Eric Carr to be their drummer?
Like the more we dive through this, the more I feel so bad for Eric. Like, because again, he just always was the kind-hearted. Like, I'm just happy to be here, dude.
I was gonna say, I'm just happy to be here.
So it's just like at every turn they're like, well, we got John. Oh, okay. I mean, I still get to go on tour, right?
But I mean, think about this. Could you hear the original Kiss doing this? I mean, think about this really hard. Can you hear? You've got to listen through it. Think about how Peter would have played it, how Ace would have played it. You know, it would have. When I say R&B,
maybe on Dynasty.
When I say R&B, it's like it almost goes towards like the Stones kind of a swagger, or Stones R&B kind of swagger. Now this. You know, it's a little more over the top than, say, even Mr. Speed or something like that.
I still picture Flashdance, you know, montage over this too.
You really, if I listened through this and I went, you know, there's a lot here, and I think that it's bludgeoned out because they're still trying to be a quote unquote hard rock band or heavy rock band. You know,
I got it. If it was on Dynasty and had the vibe of Sure Knows Something.
Yeah, if you come out of that
give
thread,
it a Sure Knows Something to Who Wants to Be Lonely, that could have worked in that era.
But even as it stands, I still am kind of surprised this didn't have greater traction than it did. I'm surprised this wasn't a bigger hit song.
I think this is my favorite on the record.
It's not my favorite, but it's one of my favorites on the record now. It used to be, I used to hate this song, but listening to it with fresh ears and with a fresh approach, you know, as much as I say the other ones were stupid, and I liked Any Way You Slice It, and I called it stupid a minute ago, but it is stupid. And it isn't as stupid as King of the Mountain. But this seems like a developed song. This had an idea. They knew where they were going with it. They knew what they wanted to do with it. It wasn't just, let's finish the song and get it done. And I'm just surprised it didn't have a greater resonance. But what are you going to do?
I feel the opposite about the next song.
Trial by Fire?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
For me, it's just boring. It's not offensive, but it lacks substance. And I honestly thought with a little more work, it could have been better. Because the main riff isn't bad.
I think all these songs, that's my complaint with all of this stuff.
Well, it's like the riff isn't bad. And the tempo isn't even bad. It's nice to have a slower song in the middle of all these super fast ones. So I'm not even mad about it being a slower tempo. It's just the riff they chose. There could have added a little bit. Okay, since we were talking about put it in the lens of the 70s era, if they had given it a little bit more of like those signature kind of open broken Paul chords, like the and kind of accented it a little bit more between just the kind of thing. I think it could have been a little bit more and it wouldn't have been as boring.
I feel the same way. I think the song's just absolutely boring, especially the chorus.
Trial by fire. Man, hold up. Pause real quick. Why does Russ always get all the hate on these episodes? Cap and I are sitting over here ripping these songs apart, and Russ is sitting over here going, well, this one isn't too bad. This isn't too bad. But we're sitting over here trashing this. I just want to make that note for the commenters. It's a three-way tie between all of us being cranky sometimes.
And to that point, this might be my favorite song on the album.
Really?
Hot take.
That is a hot take.
And I think it's ironic that this is Bruce's song.
Yeah. Because
Bruce wrote this, and
he's got quite a few co-writes
honestly,
on
I'm
this
like
album.
this, and again, I'm doing this again. This is going to be my great failing. I'm comparing this to the OG band.
Oh boy.
And I think this would have really suited the OG band.
Well, that's why I was saying if they give it a little bit more of that 70s guitar riff.
Yeah, it's there. I think it sounds closer to classic Kiss than anything else on this album.
We'll get there.
Okay.
Oh, we'll get there.
Okay.
Russ is giving me a look right now.
I was surprised to learn that this was a Bruce riff.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I like that it's kind of a very sparse, simple, kind of simplistic riff, but I think that's their wheelhouse. It's like they were always purposefully accessible. They were never inaccessible, trying to play above or beyond. Well, I wouldn't say beyond their capabilities, but they kept it purposely anchored. But they've kind of flew off the handle as they go into the 80s. But anyway, I think it's a good song. I don't think it's a great song.
It's probably my least favorite.
And
actually, no.
Well, you want to
Second
fight about
least.
it?
Yeah.
You want to fight about it? Okay, well, let's go on to the next one. I'm Alive.
Oof.
I'm Alive, but this song is dead
or nail.
This to me, if Paul ever had a filler track, it's this. He wants to complain about Gene just spitting out a song. To me, this is Paul just spitting out a song.
I said Paul seems to think his songwriting is superior in this era.
Paul's spitting out a lot of songs on this album.
Only one of his songs on this whole weak-assed album is as good as Gene's material, in my opinion.
So I think there's a couple of
and
Gene.
maybe because Gene's using leftover ideas from back in the day, I don't know. Is he just digging into his old bag of tricks, which is probably likely. But then again,
and
Trial
Paul
by Fire
claims-
was written by Bruce. If I hadn't known that, I would have assumed that it was an ancient Gene song that they just resurrected. But
and Paul even kind of makes that offhanded claim in his book. He's like, if Gene even wrote these songs.
right, and he always, and that infers that
specifically at this songwriting period.
Yeah, that it was like Bruce's songs. But come on, Paul, I'm Alive. You wrote that. You think that's better? You think that's better?
Not all.
I don't.
I don't think anyone does. Because you know what? As we're sitting here talking about that, I just listened to this album, and we're sitting here talking about it. I have no memory of what this song even sounds like.
I've got one later on. I still remember this one pretty well, mainly because of Eric's very aggressive drumming throughout the entire song. That's what's so memorable about this song is Eric's aggressive drumming.
Yeah, the whole album is aggressive on it. But.
So maybe that's one of the major points I can give it is this does kind of showcase like how much of a monster Eric was behind the kid. I mean, he was a heavy, fast drummer.
Oh, well, when he was augmented by Alan Schwartz.
Yeah.
I mean, who knows? But when
even like live stuff.
I agree with Alex. It's not memorable for me. The part that sticks out to me is the chorus with all of the 80s Desmond Child vocals and everything too. But that just sounds like every Bon Jovi song too.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he was writing with them as of
Not
yet.
But it all
Soon
bleeds.
to come.
It all bleeds. It all. You
And
hear
the
it all.
irony is, of course, who recommended Desmond Child to Bon Jovi?
It was Paul Stanley.
It was Paul Stanley.
Yep.
And that had to have burned him to see him go. And
you wonder why Paul's so bitter.
no kidding. So, Love's a Deadly Weapon, next track.
That's the one that's forgettable for me. I actually can't remember the riff.
I don't know. This one's kind of like Gene Simmons trying to be Judas Priest. And
Well,
it's not
I
terrible.
think it's not terrible. It really isn't. This started life, actually, as I understand it, as a demo of Paul's.
Yeah, because he gets a writing credit on
And
it
it
too.
was recorded. Does Paul get the writing credit on this too? Okay, because and I think it's his title, and it was recorded between Unmasked and The Elder, and it was recorded with Ace apparently.
Huh.
It was recorded at Ace's studio.
Oh, the Ace in the hole.
His his underground bunker.
I'd be very curious to hear that.
So now this is interesting to me because this is the first time I've ever even heard this referenced. That apparently they recorded like 4 or 5 songs in this little period in the bunker studio.
Yeah.
And before they changed lanes and went to go do The Elder.
Yeah.
And this was apparently of that pack. Gene took it to the Plasmatics, and it, I guess, went through some sort of baking on their end, which, of course, the Plasmatics eventually became just simply Wendy O. Williams as a solo act with members of the Plasmatics as her band. And that appeared on the Commander of Chaos album. So there's 2 versions of this song that's out there. One is Kisses, and one is Wendy O's version, and I forget what it's called on the Wendy O album.
Couldn't tell you.
I meant to write that down, I didn't. But so that's why you see Rod Swinson and Wes Beach. Rod Swinson was the Svengali for the Plasmatics and Wendy O, and Wes Beach was the guitar player, one of the guitar players for the Plasmatics. So they get a co-writing credit.
A lot of Plasmatics bleed over on this album.
So,
but yeah, the end of the song where he tries to do like the big power scream on top of Bruce's high note there.
It's wang dang doodling.
More like a meow, like a fucking Rob Halford scream.
Well, you know, he started doing more of that in that era too, but he doesn't do it like the same way. I don't mind Gene doing it, honestly.
Yeah,
I think it feels a lot more raw, whereas Paul's feels more operatic.
Right.
And I like the raw way better than I like the operatic.
It feels like Gene's consciously like wanting to be like the harder edged.
Well, he's always been that.
Well, I mean,
I agree with that.
Jumping way far ahead, a Gene scream I love is at the end of Unholy. When he's holding out that last note and they're kind of doing the little walk down. He does a really good. He does a cool scream at the end of that one.
I've never cared for that song, and I know I'm already.
I know, that's why I said jumping way ahead. But just talking about good Gene screams, I like that one. But no, I really don't have anything on this song. It's fun.
It's like it's got all this trivia behind it, but you know, it's really unremarkable overall as a song.
It's a fine thrasher for Gene. You know.
Yeah. I mean, it works for Gene. And like I said, I felt like as I listened to this album, I liked the Gene songs best.
I was gonna say, still not my favorite Gene song yet.
Okay, well, we'll get there.
Yeah.
Tears Are Falling. This was the single.
You know, it's fine, but you know what's better?
No one can see you doing that.
I know
that was for an audience of one.
That is the best Paul Stanley stage move ever. The windshield wiper fingers.
Yes.
That he still does to this day.
I looked Russ square in the eye and I started doing the windshield wiper fingers across my eyes.
I can remember watching the premiere of this video.
Yeah.
And
so that was actually something we did. So on the network, we have another show, The Couch Potatoes, hosted with Chris Morrison. And we were telling Chris, it's like, yeah, when Russ comes over a little later to record, so we're going through the Asylum era. He doesn't know a lot about Kiss, so I was showing him the videos. And I showed him the Tears Are Falling video, and he was like, oh, wow.
Oh, wow.
See, I don't think it's a great great Kiss song, but it's a great 80s pop song.
It's not offensive. It's not terrible. It's not great. It's
hooky
terribly
as hell,
great. It's not greatly terrible.
Here's a little something for that keyboard over there. That's in the apartment. I first got it and I started learning how to record on it. I figured out how to play like a synth version of Tears Are Falling because that melody is so easy.
Well, you know, he wrote a lot of these songs on keyboard.
Well, that makes sense to them.
So,
and honestly, something I can really give the song, not necessarily my favorite. I really don't have anything positive or negative to say, but this is one of the few solos you can sing.
I wrote that this is Bruce's best moment on the album.
Yep. So I find that interesting that all three of us were like, this is one of the few solos you can kind of hum along and sing.
This is actually a good solo.
Well, because it's more melody.
It serves the song.
Yeah.
It's not off blitzspeed flash notation.
Well, because there was a lot of kind of soul in it. There was like a lot of bends and like,
yeah. I can remember though watching this video, and you know, as it starts kind of high concept. It's got the girl ripping the curtains down, and Paul's over in the corner and he's wearing street clothes.
Yeah,
and I thought, man, finally they figured it out. You can't be Kiss. You've got to be the opposite. You've got to be the street level Kiss.
and then half a second later,
and then boom, we're not in Kansas anymore.
Nope.
No, and I don't feel like we really need to go down like the recording process of the videos and stuff. So maybe we'll talk about the videos as we hit the songs. So as well as watching this one with Chris, as I was telling him, I was like, now clearly they're trying to go high concept. They're trying to go artsy with this video. It's shot a certain way. This isn't just like, let's throw Kiss in a post-apocalyptic world and have them sing Lick It Up. They're trying to do something here. And there's so many innuendos. Like, it's not even subtle. Like the volcano exploding in the background,
right,
and the single tear
song,
that lands on the breast and stuff like that. It's like, okay, yeah, what's that a drop of? And the drop running down the leg, and then it shows on the guitar, and I'm just like, okay, yeah, we know what this implies. But this is the part that confused me. Why does the teardrop have enough power to break a teacup? That's the part I don't get.
Because
there's
she's
a shot of the
sad.
So I get all the other innuendos.
The weight of the heartbreak is so much, man.
But no, the
Don't
tears
you get
are
it?
the tears are
so heavy because it's gonna break.
the tears aren't tears, Russ.
But
look at the visual
I understand that,
representation
but,
in the video.
But that's what makes no sense, because if I don't fucking know. It fucking sucks. Okay, if you want me to say it in so many words, it fucking sucks. You got four guys that look like fucking they look like goddamn drag queens, which is not an insult to drag queens. It's an insult to drag queens that Kiss aren't as cool as the fucking drag queens.
No, I see what you
know
mean.
what I mean?
Yeah,
it's like they're
they tried but
it ain't
failed.
like the drag queens make Kiss look bad. Kiss make drag queens look bad.
In particular, Gene Simmons.
So they don't even look cool.
No.
They don't look cool like drag queens would look cool. They look like it's just a circus show that looks fucking stupid. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. And they don't know how to even get there. And if there's nothing that's worse than watching a band struggle to find their relevance in a time when that has already passed them by, and the only thing that's worse is a band that just does this,
trying to be cool.
and it's
There
like
you go,
it doesn't
commenters.
even fucking work, man. Kiss are, and it's like the thing is like there's so much potential for them to be a great band again, and they just don't know what the fuck they're doing.
Because again, audibly on this record, it's a lot more cohesive than the last one, but visually they went so far off the rails. Like, they started in Animalized, and then by the time Asylum hit, it was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And the thing is who they hired to get all this costuming done, right?
I had it in my head earlier.
Wasn't it Van Halen's
It was
guy?
Van Halen's guy.
Yep.
It's like they're looking at other bands and they're going, okay, that works for them. That works for them. So this is a point where they're like actively and aggressively, unashamedly and unabashedly following.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
you
even
can
Paul was
sense
not
that,
a big fan of this era.
And I'm telling you, from being there when it happened, watching this in real time and seeing that and knowing it, going, man, what happened to my band? So yeah, there's a bitterness there, but anyway, you know what? What fitting song title that comes up next?
Secretly Cruel.
And they weren't being secretly about it anyway, but anyway, they were just being cool to us. Anyway, this isn't good. This is just filler material.
I don't know.
Really?
This is
People criticizing our criticism.
this is my favorite Gene track.
Interesting.
Mine too.
Okay, well, let me just say what I'm going to say, then I'm going to let y'all go nuts and jerk off in public. Because to me, like I said, people are criticizing our criticism or my criticism, but fuck it, man. There's nothing interesting, exciting, or good with a song like this. This is disposable dog shit.
See.
Not just dog shit, disposable dog shit.
Not even good dog
shit's
shit.
disposable. I mean, I don't understand what motivates anyone to go, oh yes, secretly cool. It's like, man, it's just, this is where I get offended being a Kiss fan. It's like, this is what you're going to give me?
See, this is like the chorus is weak as fuck. I'll give you that. But
The
this
whole song
sounds
is weak as fuck.
This is the closest sounding song to a 70s Kiss song on this album, in my opinion.
Disagree completely.
Well, think about the guitar tones. I think this is one of the few tracks that doesn't have like an obviously Kramer 80s guitar sound to it. It sounds like a Paul Stanley, riff to me, a classic Paul Stanley riff. and it kind of has that bounce that you would hear on, like, say, on a Dr. Love or any of the 70s classic Kiss songs, in my opinion.
Okay,
It sounds like one of those it sounds like one of those leftover Gene Simmons songs to me.
I hear that more on Trial by Fire than I do this.
I hear it more on this one for
See,
sure.
I'll parrot everything he said, and then I'll actually take back something he said. The chorus is what grabs me.
Oh,
I
interesting.
actually like the chorus, and I like and I know why. It's the differentiating between the secretly cruel, and then eventually you get the guys in the background doing the come on, like the cool call and response layering that they kind of did with the chorus is actually pretty interesting and unique. And Gene's vocal performance on it. It doesn't sound like an 80s performance. It sounds like 80s Gene, but it doesn't sound like an 80s performance.
I'm not even saying it's an 80s song. I'm just saying it's just a bad song in general.
Well,
I'm not saying it's amazing, but
that's where you catch me too. I'm sitting here going like, no, I'm not saying it's great either. But like, if we're looking at it like within the confines of this album only,
I know. You're contextualized.
Yes, within the contextualization of the record.
I just have a hard time contextualizing something that's just so bad.
Well, I'll be you all for the next song, for Radar for Love.
Okay, go
that is the biggest filler bullshit song on the record.
you know what my favorite part of the song is, though? When you hear Paul go, "Fuck yeah!"
Exactly. This is the moment I turned into Russ. This is them pandering and reaching, and it's just bullshit. This was the song that I failed to listen to more than twice all the way through.
Okay.
It was that bad.
Why does Desmond Child have to? This is like already two Kiss songs before "Love in an Elevator," right? When did "Love in an Elevator" from Aerosmith come out?
2 years later.
Okay, because it has the exact same feel as this, and one of the Gene songs from Animalize, one of the forgetful ones. But yeah, it's the exact same feel.
This is Paul in full unashamed Led Zeppelin worship.
And it doesn't work.
It does not work for him. I think the riff is okay, but I don't think it's really good for them per se. That part is weak. I hate that. I hate that. I mean, there's potential here, but here's what and this is where I came back. You can't help but wonder if Paul and Gene had actually worked together instead of with outside partners, what the results would have been.
Yeah.
A song like this had there's actually a strong riff here.
Yeah.
It's just buried underneath all this other nonsense. And, it's like,
It just became "Love in an Elevator."
Love in an Elevator hadn't been recorded yet.
I know, but it's the exact same thing. Well, not exact, but
it's a bad mutation of Black Dog is what it is. And but I stopped and went, if they had worked together instead of outside writers, what would they have sounded like? What could they have really done?
I think the next record is what we
put his
get.
finger or foot or whatever down and said, Gene, you need to write songs with me. And Gene would have gone, I'm Gene Simmons of Kiss.
Sometimes.
We shall write a song together. You never know.
Have your people call my people.
And that's the thing, that's the missed potential, because they didn't write a lot together even in the 70s. There's not a lot of Simmons Stanley material out there. If you go look at your records, you'll be surprised how much of it is either Simmons or Stanley.
Well, they would still cut demos separately too, right?
Very rarely is there Simmons Stanley together. Here's a potential. It's like if they're they're boxing themselves into a corner, which they have done. It's like, what is their greatest strength at this point? Each other.
Yeah.
Right together. And it's like, but they don't have management.
Because the only people they have left are each other. Everyone else has changed.
But instead they're running off to other songwriting partners and they're coming in independently. And I think that that's why, and which is ironic we're saying this because we're talking about there's more cohesion to this album, but I think it's because, again, it's more the four people put the stuff together. But I'm saying as far as songwriting, I think that it would have been interesting if they had reached that point. But All Night should have been titled Ugh.
You stole it. Initially, when I was writing out my notes, when I wrote out the title, that's exactly what I put. I put Ugh All Night. Okay, now look.
So bad.
in multiple episodes, even in the past of our other show, Something Good For You, if Kiss gets brought up, this is usually my punching bag song. This is the one I go to that I'm like, this is like the epitome of horrible lyrics and everything else. Re-listening to the song again, number one, I still feel the same, but number two, take out all the lyrics. Forget the vocal melody. There's a good song underneath the stupidity that's on top.
That's what I wrote here. I got in my notes. I said this was pretty catchy and could have probably been a better song if it weren't so self-consciously clever.
Yeah.
Because as it is, it's a novelty song and a bad one at that.
And even, the vocal delivery isn't even great. Not even necessarily the lyrics. Those are bad, but like the...
Yeah. Doesn't he say... Isn't there a line in here where he says, get you turning tricks for money?
Yeah.
What the fuck are you singing about here, dude?
He wants to be a pimp, man.
Paul Stanley's a pimp, yo.
Hey, man, when you work all day and you got to go all night.
There's just one thing that money can't buy.
Listen. I need you to go out there and make some money for me, baby.
I want to see,
because these Kiss records are not selling.
I want to see that movie where that version of Taxi Driver where Paul Stanley is the Harvey Keitel pimp.
Yeah.
And the music video for this one too, because Chris and I watched that one also. Again, no subtlety. There's no subtlety in any of it. Like, again, with Mr. Speed, there was at least like a little bit of tongue-in-cheek kind of thing with it. This shit is like them like pointing at their crotches, like rap music video type shit. It's just like it's so much. It's too much.
Does Paul Stanley think he's so cool? Writing these
all
lyrics
think
down.
They're cool.
Paul thinks this is better material than what Gene's written.
Yeah.
And I don't know.
And again, maybe
man.
musically, because again, there is a cool song underneath the lyrics
And if you watch
delivery.
the live version, it's cooking.
See, I didn't bother watching it. Well, actually, I've
watched the live version. I did see a live version.
I
we'll talk about that in a minute.
I technically did too. They played this on the Kiss cruise. Yeah. And watching all the fucking 60-year-old biker girls giving us some of this in the front row.
Did they pull their surgically augmented breasts out?
Oh, they weren't surgically augmented, sir.
Some were like,
roll them back up, honey.
It's like, just put that away. I actually had that happen to me one time. We were touring in Europe with my band, and it's the only time I've ever seen a girl flash the stage at our band.
And you're like,
anyone that knows our band, the general type that comes to see our band is like long, greasy, stringy hair.
You'd see some titties, just not on girls.
Some long, stringy, greasy hair, some pimples. So I'm talking about just the average sort that comes to our show. The average sort that comes to our show is like bloated, overweight, long, greasy, stringy hair, bearded with missing teeth, covered in tattoos and scars, and more often than not, they bring their boyfriends with them. I remember this girl flashing the stage, and my first thought was, "God bless you, honey," and second was, "Please, God, don't ever do that again."
I was just thinking, you'll see some titties at y'all's show, but it won't be from girls. And sometimes the guys will have bigger ones.
What's the joke? Is like, put them away. The milk done gone bad. Oh, well.
Making you go, ugh, all night.
Okay, this album was released on September 16th, 1985, or at least that's the release date given. That may have been a ship date. I don't know. It was certified gold.
What did you say? September 16th?
That's the date I got.
Yeah, that's the day I've got too.
There's a point where the ship dates are different from the actual release dates because back in the day, I guess they would ship
early,
depending on what day the record store got them, and you know how that shit
just
works.
Fucking put it out anyway. They're not.
They're
not following directive.
It's September of '85. It was certified gold on November 13th and peaked at number 20 the same week. But this album has never gone platinum,
which I found pretty interesting.
Never.
It has never gone platinum.
Well, became number 1 in Finland.
Ooh, Finland.
Yeah. Number 3
it's
Sweden.
At least according to Kiss FAQ, it says
Kiss
it went
FAQ is
platinum.
wrong. According to the RIAA, they have never issued an award for this album. So Kiss FAQ is incorrect.
Oh, throwing darts.
No, I'm not throwing darts. I'm just going, unless the RIAA is incorrect, which I don't think they are. I think they have their records probably well in order. This album has never been certified platinum. Do they have a date?
Let's see. No, on
Hold up here, hold
Wikipedia,
on.
there's no platinum certification. It's just all gold.
I was just going by. There's a little
It just
thingy
says
directly
platinum,
underneath
yeah,
that
but
says
then-
platinum.
Can you open that and see?
Yeah,
if
I'm
it
opening
says
it. I'll
get-
send it here.
Because to my knowledge, it's never been certified platinum.
Asylum was
Not in the
certified
States, at
gold
least.
by the RIAA in '85. SoundScan, blah blah blah, and then it was certified gold in Canada later on that year.
Well, how many records do you got to get to be a gold record in Canada?
50,000.
Yeah, so no, it was
I mean, you think
certified
about
gold
this,
twice. You're right.
You can go number one in America today selling 50,000,
Yeah.
yeah,
which is bizarre.
The
It
world we
shows you
live
the
in.
physical media just doesn't matter
So-
anymore.
yeah. 88,000 here, 50,000 there.
Yeah.
So how do you
Anyway,
get number one in Finland?
wait. How much here?
Said
What- what-
certified
what-
gold on RIAA on 11/13/85. It has sold over 88,000.
No, in the SoundScan era.
Yeah.
No, it's got to sell 500,000 to go gold.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Damn, it's only 50 in Canada. Damn.
Yeah.
All right.
Anyway,
I just thought it was
whatever.
going to be closer. That's why I was reading it that way. Sorry.
Cover art on this thing is pretty terrible.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let's talk about
All
the
right.
cover.
Dynasty Part 2.
Yeah.
This allegedly was drawn from an idea from a Motel's album cover. The only album I could think of was an album that came out about 6 weeks prior to this. They did an album, the Motels did, and I think it's called Shock. I can't remember. I might be wrong.
Well, it looks more like something you'd find in a motel lobby.
Well, yeah, this looks like it looks like it'd be the carpet on the floor. They're using the color scheme from the original band, which seems a bit of a false pretense, doesn't it?
Yeah, so this is something, and I don't want to get too far ahead of myself because this is going to be something I want to talk about during Crazy Nights. But I find it interesting that they're already hearkening back to the makeup era.
Yeah. Well, they're going to always be doing that.
But not a lot. When they during the Lick It Up and Animalize and primarily Asylum era, they don't do anything that's associated with the makeup, with anything classic aside from songs in the set list.
Yeah, I get you.
And
Yeah.
this is the first little glimpse of them using the aura colors from the solo albums.
Right.
So I found that pretty interesting that only a couple years disconnected from them not touching anything associated with that era. This is the first little moment we get. We get even more during Crazy Nights.
It's a bad cover. I think that back cover that's kind of a similar thing. I think that would have worked better as the front cover.
Honestly, yeah. I mean, it's still not great, but the thing that's cool about it is I forget the exact terminology because I looked it up, but it's a process of repainting a photo,
Right.
Where you basically black and white it, and then
Right.
you take it and you just kind of fill in the colors with
Right.
what you want. And I really like that design. Just the color palette's not great, and it's not a good photo.
Well, I think that the whatever clothes they're wearing on that picture are better than the garish costumes they would wear out on tour.
You like Paul's belly shirt?
Man, look, anything is better than the costumes that they wear on that, the tour or in that video.
Yeah.
I mean, it looks a little more street level. I mean, it's still, flash, but it's still, it's like the same, like we talked about with Lick It Up. The clothes they're wearing on the cover of Lick It Up seem to work for me better than the clothes they would wear on stage during that tour. This is the same thing. It's like, they're not wearing those crazy whacked out. What? You can go
Yeah.
ahead.
I'm just showing him the back cover.
I'm like, it's not as as
They just look like
over the top.
No, they just look like insert 80s hair metal band here.
Well, and that's the problem, that they've just going to fall into that rut, because at this point, who cares? The question here is, with material like this, do you think they would have gotten signed if they were a brand new band? Especially
In this era?
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Question.
I just don't see it. I just don't see it as anything that, I'm looking at like their
Wasp was a-
contemporaries, even at this point, now they're contemporaries. We've talked about this in previous episodes, but like Van Halen's gone on to sell, 12 million or whatever copies of 1984. And as big as that album is, they're going to get even bigger with 5150, which is insane to think about. But, we're going to see Bon Jovi skyrocket over the next year.
Yeah.
They're going to sell 12 million copies of fucking Slippery When Wet. Then you're going to see Def Leppard make a comeback. and they're going to sell 12 million copies with the Hysteria album. You know, and people, they're Kiss fans today, like, they still sold platinum records. Yeah, they sold 1 million copies compared to 12 million of everybody else.
So did Kix.
That's like, it means nothing. You know, everybody could sell a million. This was when there was a glass ceiling that had been shattered, and it didn't take a lot to say, okay, you sold 1 million records. That wasn't really saying a whole lot. Did you sell 2? Did you sell 5? Did you sell... Because most of these bands were selling like 10, 12 million copies.
Yeah, and Paul was even saying that in the book. He was like, you know, we were staying afloat. We had platinum records, but you draw in comparison, and it was still peanuts to what the mainstream artists were doing. I don't know. The reason I kind of have to sit and ponder the question of would Kiss gotten signed with this material, I don't feel like this material is necessarily any worse than the output of a lot of maybe lesser bands of the 80s that weren't, you know, radio sensations.
Right.
I think the name and personnel of Kiss tainted it.
You think that they were stymied by their own
past?
Well, their own past.
I think if this was a brand new band that wasn't Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley, like if this was Alex and Cap in the 80s and we wrote this material, we probably would have gotten signed.
Maybe, but I don't think it would have been on par again still with the records that we're talking about.
I think it wouldn't be, but we probably could have.
I think it would have been in the Also Ran.
Exactly.
You know?
But I think we still would have gotten signed and had at least a mild amount of success for us to get a cocaine addiction and have to fucking fall on our faces in the 90s. I feel like we could at least get that far with this record.
Yeah, get to that sophomore slump, and you know.
Yeah. And then eventually he comes back playing like solo acoustic material.
Yeah. With that guy.
And now you would be touring bars.
Exactly.
Which is what the Kiss rightly should have wound up doing anyway. But tour begins on November 29th in 1985. In Little Rock, Arkansas, the opening act is Black and Blue.
With none other than Tommy Thayer on lead guitar.
Tommy Thayer was the lead guitar player in Black and Blue and would, of course, come back in a very big way throughout the history of this band. There are 3 different stage sets used over the course of this tour. The first featured the album artwork on the flooring. And I don't know that I've ever seen pics of that.
I couldn't find any on my recent search, but I have seen photos of it in the past. And honestly, just looking at purely if we're going to make this album part of the stage show, it actually looked cool. Okay. Like it was kind of reminiscent of the Animalized stage where they had the different patterns.
That's what they brought back as the second stage.
Yeah,
that's the stage I saw.
Yes, but the original one, it was basically the same concept, but it had those multicolor little blob stripes on it.
Right. Well, this then they had the second stage. Like I said, was kind of a mildly expanded, recycled Animalized stage, and it had the metal ramps on either side of the drum riser that would lead back to a kind of a riser behind the drum riser. That's where they would come up from.
And then that whole semicircle that Paul could run across is having something strictly in the back.
No, it wasn't a semicircle. It was the ramps. They had the ramps and then 2 stairwells that went up to the platform behind the drum kit.
What am I thinking of the... Oh, is that Crazy Nights where you had the semicircle behind the kit? Okay, yeah. Because I remember watching footage of that one time where he's just like galloping across that thing. I'm like, okay.
They had the 4 lightning bolt staircases that rose from either side of the stage. And then the third that I didn't see, the third stage was a stripped down set with a backline of phantom speakers resembling, not so coincidentally, the Van Halen 1984 stage.
Right. Yeah.
Only it looked like they had maybe a third of that stage.
Not a lot of pro footage of this tour.
But all 3 featured the new giant 20-foot tall Kiss sign that replaced the classic Kiss sign.
The infamous new Kiss sign.
And it changed colors and intensity basically at whim. That was pretty state-of-the-art shit at the time. You look at it now and it looks kind of clunky, but back then, very impressive.
This wasn't the one with the off-centered S's, was it? Because there was one logo they used for a long time, and one of the S's was all sorts of fucked up.
I don't know. No, this was pretty even.
Okay.
I always thought that that big 20-foot Kiss sign was pretty impressive looking. I thought it looked cool. Paul has a trapeze that allows him to swing from one side of the stage to the other, which is a far cry from the theatrically impressive flying rig that Gene had used during the Dynasty era.
Well, I mean, he's got to do it for Tears Are Falling.
Because
I don't know. Did he go? You know what? Actually, you know what he did when he swung across that stage?
What, Russ? What did Paul Stanley do when he ran across that stage?
Being that he was Paul Stanley, and he had his trapeze, and he was going from one side to the other, and he had to do a jungle. A jungle yell
of
some sort,
right?
You know, so I'm pretty sure that the Paul Stanley jungle yell sounded something like this. Sorry, I had to do that, dude.
That was well worth it. I saw you pulling out your phone, and I'm like, I'm gonna riff. I'm gonna fill up space as long as I need for him to get this up.
I had to do that to every one of my coworkers this week at some point or the other. They're looking at me like, "What the fuck are you doing?"
Yeah, he did it to us because we have a no time to turn group chat.
Yeah, that's right.
And Cap sent a photo of Paul with his burnt pizza.
And I said when Paul took his first bite, he went. But anyway, this tour they do make their return to Madison Square Garden on December 16th with a sold out show. I
mean, through everything they've been through, that had to feel pretty good.
That had to feel really good to be able to do that. Absolutely. On December 28th, they play Charlotte, North Carolina.
And is that the one that's on YouTube? I think there's concert.
There is a soundboard bootleg of the Charlotte show. It's not complete.
I think there's video with that too, like poor quality.
No, there's a video from another show that they've dubbed the Charlotte audio on top of.
Oh, okay.
But the Charlotte show drew a respectable 9,500 people.
You were one of them.
And I was one of them. And this was my very first concert I ever went to.
Really?
Yeah, I was 14 years old. And I can remember a lot of this very, very, very clearly. Some of it has no relevance to anyone else that's listening to this, but just looking at the Charlotte skyline circa 1985, which was nothing at all what it is today. Charlotte is,
look up photos, y'all.
Charlotte is is the 16th largest city in the United States. We're bigger than a lot of cities that you would be surprised if I told you that Charlotte's bigger than. Including Atlanta. We're bigger than Atlanta.
It doesn't feel it,
deceptively.
But our skyline has grown exponentially over the last 35 years. At the time, it was like 4 towers, and I came from an even smaller town in Virginia. So I got here, and I can remember staring at that skyline thinking, oh yeah, I've arrived. I'm in a big city.
Yeah, man.
I'm about to go into this big Coliseum to see this big concert.
See Kiss.
To see Kiss. and I was stoked, dude. And there's things I remember, and it's funny because this bootleg exists, and it's stuff that we were talking about on the way home after the show. My friend Eric, your stepfather, went with me, and my older brother Randy. My brother Randy had seen Kiss in 1979, and he walked away from this supremely unimpressed. And he was like, that was the most unprofessional shit, blah, blah, blah. There's a part where Paul kept getting a guitar, I guess it was out of tune. And at some point he makes this joke about his guitar roadie. He's saying, and some people wonder why they don't get raises for Christmas. And I remember my brother saying that was the most unprofessional on the way home, going, that was just, I couldn't believe he would do that, blah, blah, blah. He hated that show.
Especially
of course,
because
I had nothing to gauge it against. I thought it was the coolest thing I'd ever seen because I'd never seen anything else.
That comment is extra biting considering the show was December 28th, which meant there was probably a thing about him not getting a bonus or a raise.
Who knows? Maybe he did, and he's just making a joke. Who knows?
But still, that's kind of fucked up.
Yeah. To say it right on the mic for everyone, while the guy's standing there passing him his guitar.
Yeah, and he's probably using the stupid ass body glove guitars too that probably can't stay in tune worth a damn.
You may be 100% right with that.
That's what I'm saying.
No, I don't know if he was playing those at that tour. I might be wrong.
I know he started using those in the 80s though, and those are some of the ugliest guitars any band has ever used.
But I can remember, I want to say that Eric Carr fell trying to run up those stairs.
Oh, no.
But apparently he was doing that all the fucking time. And Paul made the quip like, "How was your trip?" or something like this.
damn
You
it.
know, this, I think, I'm pretty sure it was this tour that Eric started using the synthesized drum pads. He'd use them to a greater effect on the Crazy Nights tour.
And you hear them on the record,
But
too.
he did it on this one, and we thought that was really impressive. He had this cool flame, like wall of flame that would blow across the front of his drum kit at the end of his drum solo. And I can remember you could feel the heat off of that. But we were pretty close to the stage. Here's another thing I can remember about the show. Again, this is unrelated to Kiss, but just having never gone to a concert before, you know, and having heard all these horror stories about, my mom was, of course,
Everyone's on drugs and alcohol, and they're on PCP and angel dust, and they're gouging their own eyes out, and blah, 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 blah,
whatever, And you walk into this arena, and there's a haze that hangs over the floor that's just like, smoke.
Yeah.
Probably a third of it was PCP or whatever, TCB, whatever the fuck. I don't do drugs, so I don't fucking know.
Weed.
It was weed smoke and arena smoke and everything else. And we run down, we get as close as we can to the stage, and the very first thing I see is this girl pass out. And their dudes are like trying to hold her up, and they're all looking terrified, going, "We're going to get busted." And I'm going, "It's all true. It's all true.
Mom was right."
And the other thing I can remember is when the lights went down, and looking back over my shoulder, because like I said, we got as close to the barricade as we could. We were still pretty far back, but not
Maybe
like
10
super
people
far.
deep.
Maybe more like 20.
Okay, that's still pretty close.
It was pretty close. And I remember looking back over my shoulder and seeing all the cigarette lighters. That used to be a thing. Now I guess it's all cell phones.
It is.
But back in the day, it was cigarette lighters. And I that burned in my brain. I will never forget that as long as I live. I hope I never do anyway.
Yeah.
That was so exciting. And then Black and Blue came out. And the singer from Black and Blue had broke his wrist or something. He had a cast on, and I don't remember which arm it was on. But he had written in big black letters with magic marker, and I'm sure he did it himself, the word sex, S-E-X, because he was so damn rock and roll. And even at 14, and I'll tell you what else is funny, is I was wearing a T-shirt that I got for my 8th birthday. I could still wear it. It was like almost like a dress on me when I got it. But by the time I was 14, I could still wear it. So I'm still wearing a classic Kiss T-shirt
Right.
in 1985 to this show. And watching this guy with this stupid, I'm rock and roll kind of bullshit going, okay, buddy. But that was Charlotte, 1985, and that was my first show. And you can find it on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It's not the whole show. They did close with Won't Get Fooled Again, cover of The Who.
Yeah.
That they'd been doing on that tour. And I can remember when they went into it, me and Eric kind of like shot each other a look like, wow, they're playing that, And it was kind of fun. It was cool that they did it. I mean, it's not probably the world's greatest version, but I don't have it to, there's other versions that exist of it.
Right, but not that version specifically.
No,
but
they still do it.
It was
today.
It was, it was cool.
Tours.
It was fun.
Yeah, they kind of do it as a mashup and lick it up now.
Yeah.
January 5th.
Way to ruin a song.
Chattanooga, Tennessee is canceled on the day before the show due to poor ticket sales.
Mm-hmm.
January 15th, Charleston, West Virginia, the band intentionally leave Bruce Kulick out on stage alone past his cue for them to return. As a joke, at the climax of his solo, there's a point that cues them to come back out.
Yeah.
They don't come back out. So he's just like, I've done played all my fast shit, and I'm just going to have to play some more.
They're just like pranks, LOL.
And they're just like, let's just see how long he goes.
Whereas a couple tours earlier, they were shoving
pissed.
Vinny off.
Yeah, they were pissed that Vinny was doing that. It's just funny.
And now they're like, do it, motherfucker.
But apparently he eventually just throws his guitar down on the stage and walks off, which to me seems like is probably the coolest moment that Bruce Kulick ever had in the entire tenure that he was in Kiss. But
he showed some emotion.
But it's a funny story. February 4th, San Francisco, a return to the Cow Palace, who we said we talked about them kind of playing at all these like community centers and whatever else in San Francisco. However, the attendance is only 5,000.
Yeah,
better than what they had drawn on previous tours, but still, I mean, you're talking about a third of the capacity of that place.
And if we want to talk about the zeitgeist of like people paying attention to Kiss at the time, first sentence from a local review on this show is, from a local review, that Kiss has lasted this long qualifies as something of a minor miracle.
Yeah.
It's like, that's kind of even the reception of folks around the time.
February 11th, they return to the Forum in LA. And they draw 11,000 people. I mean, it's not bad, but it's still a far cry from multiple sold-out nights in the 70s.
Yeah.
March 5th, Green Bay, Wisconsin. A bomb threat causes the show to be stopped.
Oh.
And cleared in between the opening act, which by this point was Wasp, opening for Kiss.
Tipper Gore was like, I'm going to kill those fucking Wasp guys.
But they I guess they swept the building, and then everyone got to come back in, and the show resumed. April 11th, they do a second show in the New York City area at the Brendan Byrne Arena across the river with Blue Oyster Cult opening. So that
interesting.
That would have been a cool show.
Yeah.
And even then, that was.
I mean, both those bands were kind of past their thing, but I mean, gee, I'd go. I'd love it if Kiss had Blue Oyster Cult opening for them today.
Yeah, for real. I go see that in a heartbeat.
I might go see that show.
Probably more excited for Blue Oyster Cult, quite frankly.
Yeah. And on April 12th is the final show of the tour in Pittsburgh. So that kind of wound down the Asylum run. Business as usual. Nothing really exciting. Nothing, crazy over the top happening. The year 1986, we'd see several of Gene's film projects kind of come into fruition. I don't really know the timeline on some of this stuff, but I know he made an appearance on Miami Vice. He was on an episode of a horror anthology series called The Hitchhiker on HBO.
Okay.
And then, of course, he had a cameo role in the movie. Well, it's probably more than a cameo role. He had a small role, support role in the movie Trick or Treat. He was a radio DJ named Norman. Was it Norman? Yeah, Norman the Nuke Taurog. Norman Taurog was actually a real person that directed horror movies was a movie director back in the 30s and 40s, I think. And Gene adopted the name because,
of course,
he's Gene Simmons
of Kiss.
From Kiss. And then he also started an unaired TV pilot for a show called Sable.
Yeah, where he was supposed to be the star.
He was going to be the star, and I think he was replaced, but the show still never went into production. But the question here is, if it had, what would have happened with Kiss?
Well, from what I've been able to tell, because Gene recounts that, I think, in his book, and they were basically saying, like, you would be paying, like, for the amount that you make in Kiss, like, the amount of time it takes to make the show, you would need to step away from Kiss. The amount of money you make in Kiss versus how much you would be paid per episode of this show, you would almost be paying for the right to be on TV. And so I think that was the biggest reason why he just kind of stepped away from it, is the money wasn't right.
I recall that too.
I don't think that sounds right at all, because to me that's guaranteed income, whereas Kiss is, they're bad in debt. They're shoestringing along with,
they're
like,
in debt, but they're still cash rich. They may be in debt, but they have cash flow.
Not, they may be as individuals, but not as a band.
Right, but the individuals coming from the band.
I don't know.
I mean, otherwise, how are they able to?
Like, why would you even bother auditioning for a TV show then? None of that makes
because
sense.
he's trying to scratch itch of not really. He wants to be in Kiss, but he wants to be known as also Gene
so. I think he's
Simmons.
looking for a golden parachute out of this Kiss thing to move on to something else.
But he's also not going to completely trash Kiss just in case. It's like the stock market. You're in the red, but
right,
it's
he's
like
diversifying his portfolio.
Yes.
I understand.
So it's like instead of like pulling out and losing the money,
Right.
let's stay in the chance that maybe it'll skyrocket again.
what I still think if that show got picked up, would he have gone for it? I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. That is interesting. I mean, he was being a whore for the camera.
So this is also the year we see like Bon Jovi skyrocket off the back of songs that were co-written by Paul's co-writer, Desmond Child.
Mm-hmm.
Paul's like, what can we do? We've got to do whatever they're doing. We need to do that.
Yeah.
But how do you do it?
Well,
we'll start exploring that on the next episode.
And actually, real quick, right before we wrap up, one thing we did not really touch on was Bruce becoming an official member of the band. But at the same time, even Bruce himself said that all the way up to like Hot in the Shade, he still felt like a temporary guitarist.
Yeah, well, that's
so even by his own accounts, he was like, I always just kind of felt like, the fill-in hired gun guy. So it's like they didn't even give him like a proper like you're in the band moment. Like he was still for years kind of under that pretense of like this could be my last show.
When Eric joined the band, they gave him a Porsche so he'd feel more like a rock star.
Yeah.
When Bruce joined the band, they probably rented him a Aries K.
Yeah, so I kind of felt bad for Bruce kind of thinking about that one some. I was like, Eric got welcomed in big, Vinny was he was trying to be shown, the nice life, but then by the time Bruce is in.
They put Vinny, remember they put Vinny in like some like dumpy motel.
Supposedly.
Yeah, I think Bruce kind of, with experience of like playing in and out of bands up to Kiss, he probably, was more aware.
I think he saw it as a temporary role. Who knows, and then the nickname was Spruce Kulick because he had no stage presence.
I love how they would rip on him for that, like to his face.
And again, they left him out there that one night to just
see what he'd do.
Yeah, throw him to the lions. But, and from all the interviews and stuff that I've seen with that guy, he seems like he's really cool and down to earth. I don't mean to shit on him. He's in an unenviable position because he's been put into this really just by happenstance, and now he's got to make the best of a bad situation. So I really do have kind of a sympathy for him, even though I'm not a fan of what he brought to the band but that's not necessarily his fault.
Yeah,
I'm
cannot
not
be a fan of the output, but still feel bad for the scenario.
I'm not a fan of what Paul and Gene are bringing to the band at this point. So that's not shitting on him. It's just that's the era that they're in. But again, we've talked about this. This band wouldn't be existing right now if they weren't in so much financial trouble. I think at this point, had they won that lawsuit and then been able to walk away with money in the black, I think they probably would have split. We would still see Paul Stanley doing pretty much this exact same
but it would just be
stuff.
called the Paul Stanley
He'd
Band.
just be writing songs, producing.
So and so I don't know that the story would be very much different. Even if you wanted to look at this entire era as a Paul Stanley solo project that just happened to feature Gene Simmons on bass, I think it would be just as valid. But we're going to see that to probably a greater degree as we go into we're going to go into the late 80s.
Yeah.
They're going to take an inordinate amount of downtime between this album and the next album, a full 2 years between two album releases, which I think is the longest that the band has ever gone between
to this point
between releases. So we'll talk all about that on the next episode of No Time to Turn when things get crazy nice. And we hope you all join us then. For Alex and for Cap, I'm Russ. Until next time, we'll see you on No Time to Turn.
Thank you for listening. Please insert another coin by supporting the show for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/somethinggoodnetwork.